You're seeing this because you're entering the biggest comeback of your life. Carl Jung once said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." Every setback you've faced, every loss that once broke you, has been secretly preparing you for the greatest comeback of your life. This is not a coincidence. It's a divine alignment, calling you to rise stronger, wiser, and more grounded in your purpose. As you watch this video, open your heart to the signs that your breakthrough is already unfolding. Comment below if you can feel that your spirit is ready to return, not as who you were, but as who you were always meant to be. Welcome to Spiritual Wisdom, where every ending is the beginning of your rebirth. 1. Pain as the path to awakening. Pain is not punishment. It is the divine catalyst for transformation. As Carl Jung said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. When everything around you begins to collapse, it is not life falling apart. It is life rearranging itself to prepare you for your rebirth. Just as a seed must break before it grows, your breaking is not your end, but your beginning. In spirituality, every wound holds a whisper of awakening, and every tear carries the code of your evolution. Pain burns away illusions, strips you of false attachments, and forces you to meet the truth of who you are beneath all the layers of identity. It is the fire that refines the soul, shaping you into a more conscious, compassionate, and awakened being. When the path darkens and silence surrounds you, that is when the light begins to form inside. The universe does not punish, it purifies. It takes away what no longer serves your growth so that what is real can finally rise. The ego resists, terrified of death, but the soul understands that this breaking is sacred. It knows that spiritual awakening is not found in comfort, but through surrender. It is the chrysalis moment when the caterpillar dissolves into nothingness to be reborn as a butterfly. You are not losing yourself. You are shedding who you are not. The pain you feel is your soul expanding beyond limitation, preparing you to embody a new level of spiritual wisdom. Every heartbreak, loss, or disappointment is not random. It is revelation. Pain shows you what was never meant for you and brings awareness to what your spirit has outgrown. When you no longer resist the lesson hidden inside the suffering, you begin to transform. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin to understand, "This is happening for me." That shift in perception is the doorway to spiritual awakening. The fire that once consumed you becomes the very light that guides you forward. You learn that life's challenges were never designed to break you, but to awaken you, to make you aware of your strength, your divinity, and your infinite capacity to rise. Everything that is leaving your life right now is making space for what aligns with your higher purpose. The universe is clearing the old architecture of your past, so your soul can inhabit a new reality built on truth. Pain becomes sacred when you realize it is not destruction, but transformation in disguise. You are being stripped to your essence so that you may remember your power. Every ending is a silent beginning. You are walking through the ashes, but soon you will see the fire did not consume you. It revealed your gold. This is not your downfall. This is your divine reconstruction, your spiritual awakening, your comeback written by the hands of the universe itself. Comment below, "I rise through every challenge," if you're ready to turn your pain into power, and step into your greatest spiritual awakening. 2. Integrating the shadow. Every soul carries within it a sacred duality, the light we allow the world to see, and the shadow we spend our lives trying to hide. As Carl Jung once said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. True spirituality and spiritual development begin when you stop escaping your own shadow, when you have the courage to turn toward the parts of yourself that you once feared, judged, or rejected. The shadow is not evil. It is the container of your suppressed strength, creativity, and truth. It holds the fragments of your being that were buried to keep you safe, but now long to be seen so you can finally become whole again. When you stop running from your darkness, you meet the very power that can transform your life from within. What feels like rejection, heartbreak, or loss is often your soul's sacred call to come home to authenticity. Those moments that feel like endings are, in truth, invitations to return to who you were before the world told you who to be. Every disappointment exposes the illusions that kept you small. Every betrayal reveals where you placed your worth outside yourself. And every breakdown quietly whispers, it's time to rise from within. The shadow doesn't punish you. It purifies you. It strips away what is false so that your essence can finally breathe. This is why the path of spiritual development is not about perfection. It's about integration. It asks you to sit in silence with your fears, to hold your insecurities with compassion, and to see that your pain was never proof of your weakness. It was proof of your depth. When you learn to see your anger as unspoken pain, your jealousy as unhealed comparison, and your sadness as unexpressed love, something profound happens, and you no longer resist yourself. You begin to understand that the shadow is simply your inner child longing to be acknowledged. And in that moment of acceptance, light floods in. You start reclaiming the energy that was once trapped in denial. You become less reactive, more aware, and deeply grounded in your truth. That's when healing truly begins, not when everything is perfect, but when you are present with what is. Each time you face your darkness without judgment, you dissolve a layer of fear and expand your capacity to love. This is the silent alchemy of transformation, the moment when your pain turns into wisdom and your wounds become your wings. To integrate the shadow is to realize that darkness and light are not enemies, but partners in your evolution. Your shadow reveals what still needs your love. It shows you where your boundaries lie, what your desires truly are, and what lessons your soul is still mastering. The deeper you journey into your shadow, the brighter your light will shine, because light without darkness is incomplete. When you learn to dance with both, life begins to move differently. You stop being a victim of your emotions and become a conscious creator of your reality. The storms that once shattered you now cleanse you. The silence that once scared you now strengthens you. And the pain that once defined you now refines you. You are not broken. You are becoming. The moments when life stripped you bare were never endings. They were initiations. Every fall prepared you for a greater rise. The universe was not punishing you. It was positioning you. The shadow you feared was only your own power waiting to be embraced. And as you accept it with love, you enter the greatest comeback of your life, where your soul stands rooted in truth, your spirit rises in light, and your darkness finally bows to your awakening. 3. Breakdown as preparation, not punishment. The universe doesn't punish you. It prepares you. When everything seems to collapse, it's not destruction, it's transformation. The universe buries you only to plant you, and every heartbreak, rejection, or delay is not a setback, but divine redirection. Just like a seed must break open before it grows into a tree, you too must be cracked open to release what no longer serves your becoming. Pain is never meaningless. It is the chisel of the soul that carves away illusions and false identities. It strips you of masks, outdated roles, and attachments that once gave you comfort but no longer align with your truth. Carl Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." And those words hold the essence of spiritual wisdom, that suffering is the bridge to awakening. The breakdown you face is not the end, but the sacred beginning of individuation, the process of becoming whole. When your outer world shatters, it mirrors the inner dismantling of everything false within you. The old self dies so the authentic self can emerge, one that no longer depends on validation or approval to exist. Every loss becomes a lesson, every delay a test of trust, and every heartbreak a teacher guiding you closer to your purpose. It's through this sacred chaos that the soul reclaims its sovereignty. The darkness you endure is not your enemy. It is your womb of rebirth. In it, the ego dissolves, control fades, and surrender becomes the only way forward. The pain you feel is your soul whispering, "Wake up." It's showing you the cracks through which the light enters. The breakdown exposes where you have lived in illusion, where you have betrayed your truth, and where fear has replaced faith. This is not a fall. It's a rise disguised as ruin. Your suffering is not punishment. It's purification. The universe is recalibrating your path, aligning your energy, and refining your vibration so you can attract what truly resonates with your higher self. Every disappointment is divine pruning, cutting away branches that no longer bear fruit. In this hidden process, you are being molded into someone more resilient, more compassionate, and more aware. Your heart becomes wiser, your spirit stronger, your mind quieter. You begin to see that you are never losing anything real, only illusions of safety, control, and ego. What remains after everything collapses is pure essence, the soul that cannot be shaken, the consciousness that transcends form. This is the real comeback, not a return to who you were, but a resurrection into who you were always meant to be. That is the hidden alchemy of pain, the transformation of suffering into power, of confusion into clarity, of loss into liberation. And that is the secret spiritual wisdom that Carl Jung left behind. The breakdown is never your burial. It is your planting, and your roots are already reaching toward the light. Stay rooted in faith and resilience by subscribing to our channel, Spiritual Wisdom. Here, we explore how every breakdown is a divine setup for your greatest breakthrough. Join our community of believers who see pain not as punishment, but as preparation for purpose. 4. Rebirth through consciousness. Carl Jung once said that making the unconscious conscious transforms fate into freedom. And those words hold the key to understanding why your life may feel like it is being torn apart right now. You are not being destroyed. You are being purified through what mystics call the dark night of the soul, a sacred passage where the illusions that once kept you safe begin to dissolve so that your true self can emerge. Everything that used to define you, your habits, attachments, and old identities begins to lose its grip. And though it feels like chaos, this is the precise moment where spiritual awakening begins. The darkness you face is not here to consume you. It is here to cleanse you of the false layers that kept you small. It is the fire of transformation that burns away all that is not authentic, forging you into something stronger, purer, and wiser. When you stop resisting this process and start trusting it, the chaos that once terrified you becomes the crucible of your higher evolution. This stage of your journey is the sacred confrontation between your conscious and unconscious mind. The shadows you once denied now rise to the surface, asking to be seen with compassion rather than fear. Each painful emotion is a messenger, revealing where healing must occur. The more you turn toward your pain with awareness, the more power you reclaim from the parts of you that once operated in the dark. What Jung called the shadow is not your enemy. It is your hidden potential wrapped in pain. Every breakdown you endure is simply the psyche's way of realigning you with truth. The more you resist, the more you suffer. The more you surrender, the more you expand. Spirituality, at its core, is not about avoiding discomfort, but allowing it to shape you into a vessel of greater consciousness. As you let go of control and embrace trust, the divine intelligence of life begins to move through you effortlessly. The pain that once felt unbearable starts to reveal meaning. The silence that once felt empty begins to hum with guidance. You start seeing that what felt like punishment was actually purification, that every loss was making space for something sacred to be born within you. The old you needed to die for the real you to live. In this rebirth, through consciousness, your perception shifts. Obstacles turn into initiations, endings into beginnings, and wounds into gateways of light. Each moment of surrender becomes a step toward liberation. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start whispering, "What is this teaching me?" That question alone changes your vibration, turning victimhood into mastery and despair into awakening. You realize that this is not the end of your story, but the beginning of your comeback, not a return to who you were, but a return to who you truly are, beneath fear, conditioning, and ego. The dark night of the soul becomes a sacred initiation, the alchemy through which your unconscious becomes conscious, and your pain becomes the path to your greatest freedom. And as you walk through the fire with trust instead of resistance, chaos itself becomes the flame that forges your higher self, the true essence of spiritual awakening that Carl Jung called the union of the soul with its light. If this message speaks to your soul, repeat after me. I am being prepared, not punished. I rise through consciousness, and I trust the rebirth unfolding within me. 5. Awakening and alignment. Real transformation begins when you stop chasing approval and start turning inward, asking yourself, what is this trying to teach me? That question alone marks the shift from reaction to awakening, from victimhood to self-mastery. You begin to see that life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. Every challenge is no longer a punishment, but a teacher, shaping your path towards spiritual development. You stop searching for meaning in the noise of the world and begin to find it in the stillness of your own soul. In that moment, spirituality becomes not an escape from pain, but the understanding that pain itself is the pathway to your higher self. Like the phoenix, you must burn completely to rise again, renewed and wiser. The fire that once felt like destruction is now revealed as purification, stripping away illusions, attachments, and fears that no longer serve your truth. You start to realize that losing what was never meant for you is not a tragedy. It's divine protection. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Those words remind you that what feels like chaos is actually the soul's order unfolding, burning away everything false so that your true essence can emerge from the ashes. This is the sacred art of rebirth, the point where surrender becomes strength. When everything around you collapses, it's not life turning against you. It's life clearing the space for what's meant to bloom. Every heartbreak, every loss, every dark night of the soul is a divine initiation designed to pull you closer to your authenticity. You begin to see that your so-called breakdowns were never endings. They were recalibrations of your vibration. In this higher understanding, gratitude replaces bitterness, and wisdom replaces confusion. You no longer fear the fire, because you've learned that it only destroys what you were never meant to keep. As you rise, you carry the quiet knowing that your soul was never broken. It was being rebuilt. The ashes beneath your feet become sacred ground, and your pain becomes the proof of your transformation. Spirituality, in its truest form, is not about escaping life's storms, but learning how to dance within them, trusting that every wave, no matter how fierce, is steering you back to alignment. And when you finally stop asking, "Why me?" and begin to say, "Thank you for showing me," that is when the comeback begins, the moment your spirit remembers its own fire and realizes that it was never defeated, only being reborn. If this message touched your spirit today, write in the comments, "I trust that every breakdown is preparing me for divine alignment. I am awakening to God's perfect plan for my life." 6. Wholeness over happiness. Carl Jung once said, "I would rather be whole than good," and that truth cuts through every illusion you've been taught about happiness. You've spent so much of your life trying to be fine, to stay positive, to smile even when something inside you was breaking. But life was never meant to be an endless pursuit of happiness. It was meant to be an unfolding of wholeness. True spiritual wisdom teaches that peace is not the absence of pain, but the ability to hold both joy and sorrow in the same breath. You are entering the biggest comeback of your life, not because you've become someone new, but because you're remembering who you've always been, beneath the noise, the expectations, and the survival masks. You've learned to hide your pain behind achievements and your vulnerability behind perfection. But Carl Jung reminds you that what you resist persists. Every time you run from your shadow, you give it more power. Every time you suppress your emotions, you block your healing. Wholeness is not about being perfect. It's about being honest. When you allow yourself to feel the grief, the rage, the fear, and still choose love, you reclaim the fragments of your soul that you once left behind. This is the real comeback. The moment you stop chasing light and start integrating your darkness. Life doesn't ask you to be unbreakable. It asks you to be real, to flow with what is instead of fighting what should be. Peace begins when you stop punishing yourself for being human. When you accept that imperfection is not failure, it's evidence of life happening through you. The seasons of your soul mirror the cycles of nature. There are moments of blossoming and moments of shedding, and both are sacred. As Jung said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. The pain you feel right now is not a curse. It's a doorway. It's showing you where your soul longs to expand, where you are still afraid to let love in. You cannot heal what you refuse to feel, and you cannot rise until you've made peace with the parts of yourself you've buried. Your biggest comeback starts in silence, in those small moments where you no longer abandon yourself to please others. It happens when you choose to speak gently to yourself after failure, when you rest without guilt, when you forgive without forgetting your worth. You are not becoming someone else. You are finally returning home to yourself. You are rediscovering the version of you that existed before the world told you who you should be. That is wholeness, to live unarmored, unashamed, and fully present. This is your spiritual awakening, remembering that happiness is fleeting, but wholeness endures. And as you walk this path of self-acceptance and integration, you will realize that your comeback was never about starting over. It was about coming back to the truth that you were never broken to begin with. 7. The true comeback. Your scars are no longer marks of defeat, but living symbols of courage that tell the story of a soul that refused to surrender. Each silent moment that once felt like emptiness has now become the soil where your strength grows quietly. You have learned that the universe does not reward perfection, it rewards alignment. When your inner world matches your outer actions, when what you think, say, and do are finally in harmony, life begins to move with you instead of against you. This alignment is the essence of spirituality. It's the invisible current that guides you when logic fails and teaches you that spiritual awakening is not about becoming someone new, but remembering who you've always been beneath all the noise. Every scar becomes a sacred scripture written on your skin. Every tear, a seed that watered your growth, and every storm, a teacher that forced your roots deeper. You've walked through darkness long enough to understand that chaos was never punishment. It was initiation. The confusion, the heartbreak, the silence, they were all designed to burn away the illusions that kept you small. In those moments of despair, when it seemed like everything was falling apart, life was actually falling into place. Carl Jung said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." And now you see what he meant. Your pain was the portal. The wounds were not your ending, but the beginning of your transformation from pain into power, from chaos into clarity, from shadow into light. You are not returning to who you once were. That version of you could not have survived this level of truth. You are emerging as someone refined by fire, someone who can hold both the light and the dark without collapsing. Now, your silence speaks louder than your words because it carries wisdom. Your stillness has become a magnetic field of peace that draws miracles toward you. This is the quiet resurrection the soul was always meant to experience, not loud, not forced, but graceful and inevitable. The comeback is not about proving others wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you were always right to believe there was more waiting beyond the pain. When your spirit and your actions synchronize, the universe conspires in your favor. It stops testing your faith and starts reflecting your alignment. You realize that your true victory is not in conquering the world, but in mastering yourself. You've stopped chasing validation and started embodying value. This is the stage where spirituality becomes practical. It's no longer about escaping the human experience, but integrating divinity into it. You begin to honor rest as much as effort, reflection as much as movement, being as much as doing. You start to understand that the divine plan is not found in control, but in surrender. The universe rewards the soul that dares to trust the process, that allows everything that once broke it to now build it. And in that trust, you find freedom. You are no longer the victim of your circumstances, but the conscious creator of your destiny. Every breath, every choice, every heartbeat is part of the masterpiece of your rebirth. This is your true comeback, the moment your soul remembers its power. Your heart opens to light again, and your spirit walks in perfect alignment with the rhythm of the universe. To affirm your readiness for the true comeback, speak it into existence. Comment below, "I rise stronger," as a declaration that every breakdown you've faced was preparation for your greatest awakening. Let your words be the signal that your new chapter has begun. And as you stand on the edge of your greatest comeback, remember this: life will always test the strength of your spirit before revealing the beauty of your transformation. Every setback was a setup for your return, and every delay was divine preparation for alignment. You are not behind, you are being refined. So trust this moment, because it's not a coincidence that you found this message. It's confirmation. If this video resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our next video. Your journey towards spiritual awakening and self-mastery is just beginning, and we'll walk it together. Why empaths feel lost. Carl Jung's hidden map to your true self will shock you. Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. Aristotle. Welcome to Spiritual Wisdom, where we explore the deeper layers of consciousness and self-discovery through the lens of Carl Jung. In today's video, why empaths feel lost. Carl Jung's hidden map to your true self will shock you. We'll uncover why so many sensitive souls feel disconnected and how understanding your inner map can guide you back home to your authentic self. Remember, personal growth begins when you stop trying to fix yourself and start learning to understand yourself. Have you ever felt lost in the emotions of others? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's grow together on this journey towards spiritual awakening and true happiness. 1. The empath's hidden struggle. Empaths possess a rare spiritual sensitivity that allows them to feel the emotions of others as if they were their own. But this very gift often becomes their greatest burden. Carl Jung observed that such heightened perception creates what he called emotional fusion, a psychological entanglement where the empath's boundaries dissolve and their inner world becomes clouded by the pain, fear, and desires of those around them. In this state, they are no longer guided by their authentic self, but by the energetic tides of everyone else's emotions. The empath begins to lose their center, drifting in an ocean of collective feeling, unable to tell whether the sadness they feel belongs to them or to the world they've absorbed. This is the moment Jung's concept of individuation becomes vital, a process of spiritual awakening that leads the empath back to their core identity, to the sacred center that exists beneath all borrowed emotions. Jung believed that the path to healing begins when the empath recognizes that sensitivity is not meant to enslave them, but to awaken them. The purpose of feeling deeply is not to drown, but to understand the unseen connections that bind all life. Through spirituality, the empath learns to transform emotional fusion into conscious compassion, to observe rather than absorb. It is a shift from identification to awareness, a subtle but powerful movement from being a mirror of others to becoming a light of understanding. When the empath stops internalizing external pain, they awaken to their own essence, realizing that love and empathy do not require losing themselves in the suffering of others. They discover that their gift was never about carrying the world's wounds, but about illuminating the path to healing. This spiritual awakening unfolds gradually. At first, the empath feels an aching emptiness, a void where their own emotions should be. But that void, Jung would say, is not the absence of self. It is the silence waiting for truth to emerge. In that silence, the empath begins to sense their authentic vibration, the original frequency that existed before the world's energy entered them. They learn to protect their inner space through awareness, mindfulness, and grounded presence. They begin to draw energetic boundaries, not out of fear, but out of wisdom, understanding that one cannot heal the world by becoming sick with its pain. Spirituality, for them, becomes not an escape, but a realignment, an act of remembering that the soul's purpose is not to merge, but to emanate. Jung's hidden map to the true self is not a linear path, but a spiral journey inward. Each turn of the spiral brings the empath closer to self-realization, deeper into the awareness that their identity is not defined by emotion, but by consciousness itself. In this realization, they find freedom. The empath, who once felt lost in the storm of human feeling, now stands still at its center, radiating clarity. They understand that to feel everything is not to be everything. And in this understanding, a new kind of love is born, one that is rooted, discerning, and whole. The empath no longer seeks to be understood by others because they have finally understood themselves. And this, Jung would say, is the highest form of spiritual wisdom, the moment when the empath, through awakening, becomes not a reflection of the world's emotions, but a mirror of the divine. Have you ever felt lost in everyone else's emotions and forgotten who you truly are? If so, share your experience in the comments below so others can learn from your journey. If not, comment, "I will rediscover myself." And let's begin this path of self-awareness together through Carl Jung's spiritual wisdom. 2. The empathic shadow. Carl Jung taught that every empath carries within them a hidden psychological shadow, the unconscious need to be needed. This is the wounded healer complex, a pattern where your self-worth becomes tied to saving others, where you unconsciously seek purpose through other people's pain. You feel valuable only when you're helping, fixing, or understanding someone. Yet beneath that kindness hides exhaustion and silent resentment. You carry the unspoken anger that comes from years of emotional overextension, from giving more than you receive, from crossing your own boundaries in the name of love. This is the spiritual illusion many empaths live inside, believing that spirituality means endless sacrifice, when in truth, real spiritual growth begins with learning that compassion without boundaries is self-destruction. Jung observed that this pattern often begins in childhood, when an empath learns to survive by tuning in to the moods of others. You may have grown up reading your parents' energy, calming conflict before it erupted, or absorbing emotions to keep peace. That sensitivity became your gift, but also your prison. As an adult, you may enter relationships where you constantly play the healer, the listener, the safe space, yet feel unseen and depleted. You begin to wonder why love feels like labor and why you always end up emotionally tired. Jung believed this is because you confuse empathy with merging. You take on others' emotions as your own, losing your sense of self in the process. The empath becomes a mirror for everyone but themselves, reflecting others' pain while forgetting their own reflection. The path of spiritual awakening for the empath is the path of reclaiming the self. It is not about shutting down your heart, but learning to protect it. It is understanding that your energy is sacred and that saying no is sometimes the most loving act you can offer. Jung's work reminds us that individuation, becoming who you truly are, begins the moment you stop defining yourself by what others need from you. True spirituality is not about saving the world. It is about aligning with your own soul so deeply that your very presence becomes healing. When you honor your boundaries, your light grows purer. When you stop rescuing others, you rescue yourself. When you stop absorbing everyone's emotions, you finally hear the quiet wisdom of your own inner voice. As you grow in awareness, you realize that helping others is not your identity. It is a natural expression of your wholeness. You no longer give from emptiness or guilt, but from fullness and peace. You no longer seek validation through your ability to care, because your worth is no longer built on pain. Jung's hidden map to the empath's true self reveals that love without self-awareness turns into bondage, but love guided by consciousness becomes freedom. Spiritual growth invites you to balance heart and boundary, compassion and clarity, giving and receiving. And in that balance, you find that your presence alone, not your sacrifice, is what truly heals others. Comment below, I am ready to face my shadow. If you're ready to embrace your true self and step into your power, let this be your moment of awakening, empath. 3. The false persona. Many empaths grow up believing that love must be earned through selflessness, and over time they unconsciously create what Carl Jung would call a false persona, a sensitive healer mask that radiates endless compassion and warmth. On the surface, this seems noble, but beneath it lies a quiet exhaustion. You may smile when you want to cry, comfort others when you need comfort, or pretend to be strong when your spirit is running on empty. The more you give, the more people adore you, yet the less you feel connected to who you truly are. Jung's spiritual wisdom reveals that this mask isn't born from deceit, but from survival. As children, many empaths learned that peace existed only when everyone else was calm. So, you adapted. You tuned in to every emotion in the room, absorbing pain like a sponge and translating chaos into harmony. It became your gift and your cage. The persona grew stronger with every moment you silenced your own needs to protect someone else's heart. Jung understood that every persona conceals a shadow. For empaths, that shadow often holds the emotions you've been taught to suppress: anger, frustration, the desire to say no, or the longing to be seen for who you are rather than what you give. When these parts of you stay buried, they start whispering through anxiety, fatigue, or a vague sense of being lost. You might think you're broken, but you're not. You're just carrying too many emotions that aren't yours. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This means that the healing path isn't about rejecting your empathy. It's about reclaiming your authenticity. The mask you wear to keep others comfortable is the same one that hides your own brilliance. To find yourself again, begin noticing the subtle moments when your kindness turns into performance. When you help because you fear rejection instead of because you truly want to, pause and breathe. Ask yourself, what do I feel right now? What do I need? Every time you choose honesty over perfection, you take a step toward individuation, the process Jung described as becoming whole. It's not easy, because authenticity demands courage. You will disappoint people who prefer the version of you that exists for their comfort. But as Jung taught, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. That terror is also the threshold to freedom. When you stop defining your worth through how much you can fix, heal, or please, you begin to discover the quiet strength of simply being. This is where true spiritual wisdom begins, not in becoming more loving, but in learning to love yourself as deeply as you love others. To be authentic doesn't mean abandoning compassion. It means allowing compassion to include you. When you release the pressure to always be the healer, you make space to be human. You stop chasing approval and start embodying truth. Empaths were never meant to drown in others' emotions. They were meant to understand them without losing their center. The false persona may have earned you acceptance, but your soul craves alignment. When you finally remove the mask, you don't become less light. You become real. And in that realness, every wound turns into wisdom. Every boundary becomes an act of grace. And every breath reminds you that being true to yourself is the highest form of love there is. 4. The individuation map. The first stage of Carl Jung's hidden map for the empathic soul is shadow integration, a courageous process of facing the darkness within the unhealed parts that crave validation, the anger buried beneath compassion, and the wounds that quietly demand to be needed. Jung's spirituality reminds us that true healing begins not when we suppress our pain, but when we meet it with awareness. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. For empaths, this means recognizing how the desire to fix others often masks the longing to be seen, loved, and understood. It is a spiritual awakening that asks you to stop identifying with your pain and instead learn from it, transforming emotional chaos into inner strength. By allowing yourself to feel fully without judgment, you begin to reclaim your energy and see that your sensitivity was never weakness. It was divine intelligence guiding you toward truth. The second stage, persona dissolution, invites the empath to release the caretaker identity, the mask built to earn love through sacrifice and silence. Many empaths mistake self-erasure for compassion, believing that peace means pleasing everyone. But Jung's path of spirituality and individuation exposes this illusion. The persona is the role you play to survive in a world that often misunderstands your depth. To dissolve it is to free yourself from the burden of constantly rescuing others at the cost of your own peace. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." This stage teaches that loving others does not require losing yourself, and empathy without boundaries becomes self-betrayal. The moment you stop apologizing for your light, you begin to embody the essence of authentic love, one that nourishes rather than depletes. The third stage, active imagination, is where your spiritual awakening deepens. Here, Jung encourages you to enter dialogue with your unconscious, through dreams, symbols, and reflections. This is the sacred language of the soul, where intuition speaks in whispers and archetypes reveal hidden truths. For the empath, this stage is a rediscovery of inner power, transforming emotional sensitivity into spiritual insight. Through meditation, journaling, and creative visualization, you connect with the deeper layers of your psyche that have long waited to be heard. Each dream and emotional trigger becomes a bridge between your conscious mind and your higher self. In this space, you begin to see that spirituality is not about escaping the world, but about entering it with awakened awareness, where every experience, even pain, becomes a teacher. The final stage, self-realization, marks the moment when the empath steps fully into wholeness. Here, empathy is no longer a wound, but a gift refined by wisdom. You no longer absorb others' emotions unconsciously. You sense them with clarity, compassion, and strength. Jung's spirituality shows that the goal of awakening is not detachment, but balance to love deeply without losing yourself. Healthy empathy blooms when you can give without depletion and receive without guilt. Boundaries are no longer walls. They become sacred spaces that protect your peace while allowing love to flow freely. In this state of self-realization, the empath no longer sees themselves as broken or too sensitive, but as an awakened soul, grounded, discerning, and radiant with inner authority. Through shadow integration, persona dissolution, active imagination, and self-realization, Jung's hidden map becomes not just a path of psychology, but a living journey of spiritual awakening, where the empath finally remembers that their light was never lost, only waiting to be seen from within. If this message speaks to your soul, subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Your journey of self-discovery and individuation continues with every insight you unlock. 5. Archetypal empathy. Empaths carry within them the invisible currents of archetypal energy, the deep, timeless forces that Carl Jung called the collective unconscious. These energies, such as the victim, the savior, or the mother, are not random emotions, but living symbols that move through the human soul. When an empath unconsciously channels these archetypes, their empathy becomes overwhelming. They take on everyone's pain, trying to save, to heal, to comfort, without realizing that these impulses are not entirely their own. The victim archetype makes them feel responsible for suffering that doesn't belong to them. The savior archetype pushes them to rescue others, even at the cost of their own peace. The mother archetype urges them to give endlessly, even when their spirit is empty. These patterns create emotional compulsions that leave them drained and disoriented, unsure where their energy ends and another's begins. Yet Jung taught that what is unconscious rules us until it becomes conscious. Once you begin to see these energies for what they are, ancient forces, not personal burdens, everything changes. Empathy transforms from emotional chaos into sacred power. Spirituality and spiritual growth begin when awareness enters these hidden patterns. Instead of being consumed by the victim, you learn from it compassion without martyrdom. Instead of becoming the savior, you embody love without losing yourself. Instead of being trapped in the mother's self-sacrifice, you nurture from a place of balance and strength. The moment you realize that you are the vessel through which these archetypes flow, not their prisoner, your empathy becomes an instrument of wisdom rather than exhaustion. This awareness does not disconnect you from others. It connects you more deeply, but with boundaries made of light. You begin to sense emotions with clarity instead of confusion. You recognize that not everything you feel belongs to you. You become the observer, still compassionate, but anchored in your own soul. You start to hold space for others without absorbing their chaos. This is the alchemy of empathy that Jung hinted at, turning unconscious energy into conscious power, turning feeling into wisdom, turning pain into purpose. Through spirituality, you no longer drown in collective emotions. You become the healer who understands them. Every time you stay centered in your awareness, you elevate the energy around you. Every act of self-understanding ripples outward, transforming empathy into divine equilibrium. This is how the empath's journey, once filled with confusion and fatigue, becomes the very path to spiritual growth, where sensitivity evolves into sacred mastery and feeling too much finally becomes a feeling with divine intelligence. 6. Conscious empathy and emotional sovereignty. Empaths who begin to awaken often realize that they have been living their lives entangled in the emotional webs of others, unable to tell where their energy ends and someone else's begins. Carl Jung, through his profound spiritual wisdom, explained that the journey toward wholeness, what he called individuation, requires learning emotional sovereignty, the art of feeling without absorbing. True empathy does not mean merging with everyone's pain. It means standing in awareness so deep that you can witness another's suffering without drowning in it. When you reach this level of consciousness, you no longer confuse compassion with self-sacrifice, nor love with the need to fix. You begin to help others from a place of fullness rather than from the empty wounds of your own unhealed past. Carl Jung believed that when an empath loses their boundaries, the psyche becomes flooded with projections, illusions, and foreign emotions that blur the sense of self. He called this psychic inflation, a condition in which your inner world becomes too crowded with energies that do not belong to you. Spiritual wisdom teaches that this happens because empathy, when unconscious, becomes an open channel without discernment. But the awakened empath learns to close the channel when necessary, not out of coldness, but out of clarity. You start to understand that saying no is a sacred act, and that boundaries are not barriers, but bridges to authentic connection. You stop rescuing others out of guilt or fear, and instead offer your energy as a conscious gift, one that empowers rather than enables. As you step into emotional sovereignty, you begin to notice how emotions flow through you like waves, yet you remain the ocean vast, grounded, unshaken. Jung often compared the path of individuation to alchemy, where the raw lead of unconscious reaction is transformed into the gold of awareness. Each time you observe an emotion and recognize, this is not mine, you are refining your soul. Each boundary you establish becomes a ring of light around your spirit, protecting your peace while allowing your compassion to shine even brighter. Emotional sovereignty does not isolate you. It connects you more deeply to humanity because you no longer serve from pain, but from power. You begin to radiate healing simply by being centered in your own truth. When you cultivate this awareness, you understand that empathy is not a burden, but a sacred instrument tuned to divine frequencies. You learn to sense, feel, and understand others while remaining rooted in your own inner harmony. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." In reclaiming your awareness, You stop being unconsciously directed by others' emotions or the chaos of the world. You become a calm presence amid noise, a mirror that reflects truth without distortion. To be an individuated empath is to embody the balance between heart and wisdom, to love without losing yourself, to feel without falling apart, to give without forgetting that your energy is holy. This is the transformation Jung envisioned, where empathy evolves into enlightenment and compassion becomes your natural state of being. 8. Integration and rebirth. True individuation is not a gentle awakening, but a sacred dismantling of a psychological death that precedes rebirth. It is the moment when the empath finally releases the identity of the wounded healer, the one who has carried everyone's burdens, mistaking compassion for self-erasure. As Carl Jung revealed, the path of the self demands that we turn inward and reclaim what has long been fragmented. This is not a rejection of empathy, but its transformation into conscious empathy, the kind that feels deeply yet remains rooted in inner peace. It is a profound stage of spirituality and spiritual growth, where you begin to understand that saving others is not your mission. Embodying your light is. The empath who once dissolved into others' pain now becomes a radiant lighthouse, steady, luminous, and sovereign, guiding others not by rescuing them, but by showing what inner balance looks like. You no longer absorb every emotion around you. Instead, you hold them in awareness, like waves passing around a rock that does not move. This is how true healing begins, not by taking in the darkness of others, but by allowing your light to remain unshaken within it. As you grow in consciousness, the energy that once scattered across everyone's chaos now gathers within your own field, like a golden current of clarity. Compassion matures into discernment. You start recognizing that boundaries are not walls. They are sacred lines of self-respect drawn by love. The awakened empath's gift is no longer self-sacrifice, but sacred service. In this rebirth, you learn to give without depletion, to love without losing yourself, to feel without drowning. You stop confusing your purpose with the pain you once carried, realizing instead that every wound was a teacher, every heartbreak a portal. Each time you faced emotional collapse, your soul was guiding you toward the awareness that wholeness was never something to be earned. It was who you already were beneath all the noise. Carl Jung called this arrival the encounter with the self, the divine center of consciousness where opposites unite. Here, light and shadow are no longer enemies, but allies revealing the fullness of who you are. You understand that your empathy was never a weakness. It was a compass pointing toward divine integration. You no longer need to heal by merging with others. You heal by embodying your truth so completely that it naturally elevates those around you. The old empath dies so the true empath can be born one who radiates serenity instead of suffering, one who knows that stillness is not emptiness, but power contained. This is what it means to walk the path of conscious empathy, to become light that neither blinds nor burns, but simply shines. And through that shining, you realize the deepest truth. Spiritual growth is not about adding more light, but remembering that you are light itself. When you stop identifying with wounds and begin identifying with wisdom, your very presence becomes medicine. You become what Jung called the living symbol of the self, the embodiment of balance, love, and divine purpose. This is the true integration and rebirth of the empath. a soul no longer seeking to fix the world, but anchoring peace within it, showing that real spirituality is not about escaping life, but becoming fully alive within it. 7. Practical empathic alchemy. Emotional sorting is the sacred art of recognizing what emotions are truly yours, a vital act of self-awareness that marks the beginning of your spiritual awakening. Many empaths carry emotional energy that does not belong to them. Fear, grief, or anxiety that has been unconsciously absorbed from others. Jung's wisdom reminds us that the path to wholeness begins with discernment. When you learn to pause and ask yourself, is this emotion mine? You reclaim the power to separate truth from illusion. Emotions are visitors, not permanent residents. They pass through you, but they are not your identity. The moment you become the conscious observer rather than the absorber, you begin to experience emotional freedom. You start to feel lighter, clearer, and more rooted in your own energy, understanding that empathy is not about taking on pain, but about transforming it into compassion through awareness. Boundary rituals are the next step in this empathic alchemy. They are not just mental barriers, but spiritual practices that protect the sacred temple of your energy. Every empath must learn that self-preservation is not selfishness. It is alignment with divine order. Jung once observed that loneliness is not a lack of people, but a lack of understanding. Boundaries allow you to reconnect with your inner voice and maintain that understanding with yourself. Cleansing rituals, mindful solitude, breathwork, prayer, or even spending time in nature are ways to strengthen your energetic shield. When you see your energy as sacred space, you stop giving unrestricted access to those who drain your light. Boundaries teach others how to love you properly and remind you that your peace is holy. Protecting your energy becomes a daily act of devotion, a form of spiritual discipline that keeps your empathy balanced and clear. Authentic expression is where your soul begins to breathe again. So many empaths silence their truth to avoid conflict, but this silence only suffocates the soul. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And that means allowing your authentic self to speak without fear. Expressing your truth does not mean shouting louder. It means speaking honestly, with presence and love. Each time you express what is real for you, you release the tension of suppressed emotions and restore harmony between your inner masculine and feminine energies, your strength and your sensitivity. Living authentically allows your outer life to reflect your inner truth. Your words, choices, and actions begin to align with your higher self, and that alignment radiates peace, confidence, and spiritual power. The more you embody your truth, the more your presence alone becomes healing for others. Shadow work is the final and most profound stage of transformation. It invites you to confront the darker sides of empathy, the urge to fix others, the subtle superiority of believing you are responsible for their healing, or the hidden control masked as compassion. Jung revealed that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. When you face your shadow with humility, you uncover the deeper motives behind your empathy. You learn that true compassion does not rescue. It respects free will. It does not absorb pain. It understands pain. By integrating your shadow, you transform empathy from emotional chaos into spiritual mastery. You no longer drown in the suffering of others because you have turned your own darkness into light. That is the alchemy Jung spoke of, the process where empathy matures into wisdom, where sensitivity becomes strength, and where spirituality is no longer about escaping the world, but about living in it with awareness, grace, and divine clarity. As we move deeper into the path of empathic alchemy, let's honor the courage it takes to transform sensitivity into true spiritual wisdom. Your presence here means you're not just feeling, you're learning to transmute emotion into power. Comment below, "I am mastering the art of empathic alchemy," to affirm your growth on this sacred journey. Now, let's continue unveiling Carl Jung's hidden map to your true self. And remember, dear soul, the path of an empath isn't about escaping the world's emotions. It's about remembering who you are beneath them. As Carl Jung taught, the true journey is not toward becoming someone new, but toward awakening to the self that has always been within you. So take this wisdom into your daily life and let it guide you back home to your authentic power. If this message has touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our upcoming videos that will continue to illuminate your spiritual path.